I'm haunted. Today is Thursday, August 21st of 2025, and I think my machine is haunted. Welcome, love you, mean it, and here we go. Thank you and welcome, everyone. I have so many stories that I want to tell you, and I just love it. Thank you so much. My cats are actually they're sitting over here to the side. Um, they've just been real chill lately, which I'm so happy. And they're in watching cat TV. I can hear the little birds going. So I love it. So I want to thank you, each and every one. Thank you to True Oracle for being here. We're going to hear some scary stories. And I was just getting into the one, it was getting really good. And I kept thinking, why? Why is everybody saying, where am I? She must be late. She must be going to Dairy Queen to get a cotton candy blizzard like I needed. All right, my darling, Friday here. So you are our future for sure. You look at that puppy. I love that. Are we going to make this a call-in show someday so we can tell our ghost stories? Yes, yes, yes. This is a limited series. We're going to go through probably until the first week of November. We're going to have we're going to have a lot of things that we're going to talk about it. So there you go. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, here we are. Nearly 1 a.m. in the morning in UK. Thank you for the dedication in being here. Love it. Love it. Now, before I forget, I have to say this. There are new membership levels on True Oracle. They are for member only videos, member only manifestations, subliminal, and I have fixed it so there are no ads on those videos that are earmarked. And there's 2 additional levels. And when you level up, you get everything that you've had before and then some. Top level is the Oracle Vault. The next in line is the Oracle Circle. There's been a video put out already. I think many of you are enjoying it. We're doing some subliminal for fate and fortune for the manifestation side because I want to see you manifest what you need to do. Let's talk about this house. This house, my darlings, is a concept of a home that I already know. From Ohio, from my early days, and you see that light up there? Well, that really isn't there. You see how this tree, and look at this house. Do you see how this tree goes up and then starts going? Well, that was actually what happened. There was a tree that came up and grew into the side of the house. That light had been on forever. So a young lady from the UK, I was, I think, late teens, 18, I think. She was 18. So we had some friends and we decided to go ghost hunting. Now, my darlings, ghost hunting back in those days, it was not called paranormal. We didn't even know that name. It was ghost hunting. And my grandparents were always one who would actually go out to these homes, scope them out. See, I guess they were like the local Warrens, okay? But my grandmother was this psychic chick, I'm telling you, she was something else. She told us not to go to this house. Do you think we listen? I thought I was a big shot because my grandparents, right? So we went. Um, oh, Jane, wish I could have asked you an explanation on my reading. Love you. I still don't understand, even with the video. I'll go back on YouTube. Okay. So, my darling, some of us, my friend, her name was Greer from the UK. We were the same age, and it was my first time having an experience with a lovely lady from across the pond. We were like peas and carrots. She lived in the apartment above my dad, and we were always together. It was wonderful. So, okay. So I'm getting distracted because I'm looking at the chat. All right. So I decided I wanted to go to this house. My grandmother told me not to go. Wish I would have listened. So it went down this long lane. Now, this was in Ohio, mid-region, early September. The corn was up, and it was said that if you drove down this particular lane toward this house, you could see that there would be like a lantern that was lit that would float. That would float beside you. When we were looking for, we wanted to see it. We were looking for it. We didn't see anything. So we went down this road easy. Didn't tear it up, easy. We went down the road. We went through, and we finally pulled up, and we saw this. Now, this is my concept, the best I can do from memory and everything else, but I wanted to make sure that I put this there and had the tree in moving into the house. Now, we pull up, and I said, oh my gosh, I think somebody's there in the house. And they said, the rest of, no. Okay. We go up. The guys decided that they wanted to go upstairs, or they wanted to go in first. And I was glad because, sometimes when you have so many people, if you run into something, it makes it just as hard as if you were by yourself in some regard. So remember the light. We're standing out. Let me see if I can point it this way. We're standing up in here. We're standing up in there. Makes me shudder to think. So we hear this commotion in the house. We just didn't know. Lots of banging and carrying on. And finally, the one whose name is Scott got to the top. He's looking out the window and he's going, and we're like, what's up there? And he's like, nothing. So he opens the window. A part of the window fell out, crashed on here. And so, that's what happens in old houses. So you've got to be careful of that amongst everything else. And we're hollering at him, where's the light coming from? And he's like, what light? I don't see a light. And he was serious. He was not joking. So one of the other guys said, I'm going up there because he's full of the beans. He didn't say beans, but So he goes up. We see kind of shadowy because it was not dark when we went there. It was semi like this. He gets up here into the room and we see him come behind Scott, and you could see he's looking around and he's like, I don't have anybody meowing here. There's nobody meowing. There's nobody. So anyway, they're all sleepy. You may hear the cat TV though, because there's little birds and stuff going on in the other room, because this picks it up pretty good. So he goes up there. His name is Brian. So Brian and Scott are up there, and Brian's looking at us, and he's like, seriously, there is no light here. We're standing down here looking. I was mesmerized, and I'm thinking, what is going on? My darlings, it was within a flash. Scott and Brian were up there. The window was a little bigger, and you could see a shadow come behind them. And I'm not kidding. We girls, and there was another guy there whose name was Brian as well. Hello, all these Brians. And my gosh, it was horrible. We were screaming, turn around. There's somebody there. Because the one thing I want you to know, my darlings, is when you go into places like this, don't go alone, because many times paranormal investigators will announce where they're going ahead of time if it is not a controlled environment, like if there's not a manager or somebody. And many times there have been problems, unalivings, issues, people getting hurt because they think they're going to show up. They either want to join in or they want to scare somebody. So we thought it was someone else at first. So the Brian that was with us takes off running. Now, I know it's weird because, hello, it must have been a Ohio thing. And these guys are athletes. I mean, football players, track, they're athletes. So it's not like, they're slunky or this fellow, Brian, we used to call him Taco, because Taco Bell just came to our area. And of course, we didn't have cell phones. So anytime we would call Brian to say, Brian, what are you doing? His mother would say, oh, he's down at Taco Bell. And back then they had a limited menu, so there wasn't that much and that he loved it so much, we just called him Taco. So that's what I'm going to call him. All right. So Taco goes racing up. You could hear him. He's yelling, be careful, there's somebody behind. And all of a sudden, we see them disappear. All of them. It was silence. And it's us girls standing down here. I'm not kidding. I'm like, I turned to Greer, because I didn't cuss, and I said, I am about to defecate in biblical proportion. Where did they go? What do we do? And now, my darlings, you didn't have cell phones back then. This was like 150 years ago when I was a teenager. Driving away was not an option because we were not going to leave these guys, 3 men, young men, in this house. And so Greer says, I'll go. Now, listen, Greer didn't have a driver's license. She didn't, and I had my dad's car. So I'm like, you can't drive away. And she was not, she was just one of these friends that would just hang out. She was wonderful. She didn't want to do this, really. She just wanted to be there. Yeah, and defecating in proverbial biblical proportion is what I was doing, because I'm thinking, oh, isn't this wonderful? I'm here at my dad's car. I have a girl from a different country, and 3 boys are missing, and everybody else is having a breakdown. And I'm going to be grounded for the rest of my life. There goes my date, Saturday night, I could think of. So I was dating somebody in football. So we're standing there for a minute. We're arguing. What do we do? What do we do? What's going on? What's going on? It was so weird because we were all looking at them, and right before our eyes, it was a literal disappearance. It was like someone just went like this, and they were gone. So finally, we hear them yelling, screaming. And I mean, the tears with us, because we just didn't know what to do. We were so concerned and worried. And they came from out behind the back of this house. We girls, we ran around the house. There was a girl with us by the name of Melody. We called her Mel. Mel was she was catatonic. She was in shock. She was there. She couldn't speak. So you can imagine the horror that we were feeling. We run around the back of the house, and there was absolutely no entrance, nothing. Nothing. Not a storm cellar, not a window they could have crawled out of, because as you see, this was built on a crawl space, so they would have had to go out a window and drop down. There was nothing. They were in shock, and we said, we've got to get out of here. We've got to get out of here. So you can bet I get behind the wheel, and I'm heading down this road because it's now like the sun's gone down. And all that's going through my head is like, drive. And I'm holding on to dear life because I'm thinking, oh my heck, I've got my dad's car and he's going to kill. That's what I'm thinking. And all this stuff going on is, what is our parents going to do? My darlings, all of a sudden, on the passenger side, this lantern comes up and just does just right beside us and goes right off into the cornfield. I don't know what it was. Nobody does know what it is. I've never driven so fast. Even back then, my friends would say, Zelda, you drive like a grandma. Because I would always have my dad's car. I knew what I would get if I wrecked it. I'm putting the hammer down. And they're like, oh my God, slow down. I ain't slowing down till we get to Mansfield. I'm not slowing down. And I'm like, cops, pick us up. And there was nobody around. Nobody. There was no one. We were so scared. So in paranormal fashion, in Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine fashion, what do we do on the way home? We decided to stop at Stan's. What was Stan's? Stan's was just a little old beat up restaurant that was 24 hours a day that you could go in, and they had the little jukebox on the wall by the booth, and you put the quarter in and you could get 3 songs for a quarter. And so what do we have to do in Scooby-Doo fashion, before we went home, we stopped in for some coffee and pie. And when I think about this now, I have to laugh at myself. And look, if you're ever with me in the midst of Muckmeyer mayhem, totally alert, make sure there's a place that we can stop and have pie and coffee so we can calm down before we go. So, my darling, so we're sitting there. Wasn't too many people in there. We're sitting there. And finally, Taco breaks down. And the first thing I said was, I'm sorry. Would you have rather gone to Taco Bell? I mean, I was serious. I just didn't even think, right? Hello, Zelda. I'm like, I'm sorry. Would you have rather gone to Taco Bell? I'm sorry, Taco. And he looked at me like I was completely daft. And he said, no, we disappeared for an eternity. And he was serious. Taco was sitting across from me. The tears started to come. Scott, Brian, they were not the same. From what they said is when they got up there, Taco felt a hand on his shoulder and pulled him. And he said it was with such a force that he felt his feet fly up from underneath him and pulled him down. And Brian and Scott went with him. They all went with him. They were in a place, and he said they were not alone. They were there with other people, and they didn't know who it was. It was like this was missing people. It was like a portal that they went through. And I said, you're going to tell me that you didn't see that light in the window? They said, no. You get up there, and there was nothing. You could not see anything except we saw you guys down by the gate post. I've always wondered about that. Was that another dimension? Was that another something or other? Was that just, and poor Taco. I mean, I think the last time I saw him was at a high school reunion, and that was in the early 2000s. And when we saw each other, he just stood there. It was like, didn't want to, no, did not even want to remember. They said this was the scariest place and the scariest existence. And with the other people there, he said they couldn't talk. They tried to communicate. They tried to say, who are you? And he said they were dressed in all types of periods of clothing. And I said, what brought you back? I mean, think about this. What brought you back? And he said the same hand that pulled them down, pulled them out. It felt like a same. And I said, that's got to be a divine hand. And he said it pulled them out. And he said they landed in the backyard because they were upstairs. Look at this. 1, 2, 3. It was like 3 floors. And they landed. Now, my grandmother told me not to go to this house. Guess who didn't listen? And I would never have recovered if, well, we would have been probably held responsible for missing. I mean, And I truly believe, my darlings, that sometimes missing people, and especially in these forests and everywhere else, especially in the Appalachian Mountains. But I believe that. And that's why we have to be careful. I mean, we didn't take the time. It was just run in. Now, we never had, pardon me, we never had that want and need to graffiti or do anything there. We just never, we never we would not destroy anything. That's my point. We would just like to go in and look around, be nosy, see where doors led, see where this led. But the lesson was, Scott went up first. You never go in by yourself. And then Brian followed, and then Taco. The house, when I went up for my high school reunion in the early 2000s, was still there, looking like this. And they said this whole side had like fallen in because this tree had grown into the side of the house. We don't know what it is. I mean, it's baffled me over the years. It just literally almost brings tears to my eyes because you think, my gosh, there are your friends, and you hear them scream. These are young men now. Hello. You hear them screaming, and you see this dark shadow, because all we saw was from like waist up because of the window, and it was behind them, and we heard screaming, and then all of a sudden it was just deafening quiet, and the sky kind of looked like this. It wasn't green. I added that. Hello, that's just me. But the house sat, don't know if it's still there. I'd love to find out, but I'd never go in it or around it. Pardon me. The entire part of this house. You know, sometimes, my darlings, I think that there are some bad entities that will lure you into places. I shudder to think what would have happened if I went in. What would have happened? When we came back, yeah, it would make a great movie, wouldn't it? When we came back, it took me a couple of days because having to recover and knowing, after our pie stop, hello, and they always made fun of me because it was like the first thing I go in, because we knew the waitress at Stan's, we went to high school with her. Hello. Hey, Sarah, you got any peach pie? Zelda forevermore. So, I think what it is I just went through this mental block of not wanting to face it because I'm one of the, that really makes, in my thought process, it makes an excellent researcher. The more questions you ask, the better researcher you're going to get. And it was always the what ifs and the whys and how. And those are the things that you have to really think of when you're researching and doing research in paranormal. Now, I will tell you this, unless I know a property or I have been invited, you won't catch me doing this stuff. And of course, you don't see that many where I'm from anymore. You don't see that many abandoned homes. There were, I mean, you could, in farms around Ohio, yeah, you would see them. You don't see that many anymore. And I wouldn't do it anyhow. First of all, it's trespassing. Secondly, you don't know what you're going to run into. If anybody asks me to come out to a property nowadays, I have a little questionnaire that I have people fill out. A good paranormal researcher will do that, by the way, if you ever have one to come to your house. It is, are any of you on medication? Have any of you have been treated for any type of mental illness? Have any of you been this and that and that? And I mean, you have to go through those things because all of it can and is a factor many times, including medication. So, and well, I'll tell you what, a lot of the Amish people would buy them for little and nothing. And they would just renovate, go in and just gut them and renegade, hello, and renovate them. So finally, after the pie night, went home that night, I couldn't sleep because all I could see was that dark entity coming behind them with that red light. And I just racked my brain. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my mom. My mom would have just fainted away. My mom was a good soul who just was tender. She was tender. I'm going to say it that way. She was tender. She wasn't an old soul like Zell, who just didn't care. She was just tender. I didn't even dare tell her. To this day, I don't even think she knew. But I went down to visit Grandma and Grandpa. Went for breakfast. A couple of days later, was a Saturday. And I said, hey, Grandma, do you remember when you told me not to go to that house? And she looked at me and she goes, oh, I knew you were going to go. Who do you think you're talking to? So Grandpa comes in and I said, Grandpa, you got to hear this. And they sat there just tentatively. And he told me, because he was from West Virginia, and he told me, he said, you know, I heard of a place like that in West Virginia when I was growing up. And we didn't go near it. Kids would go missing from the neighborhoods. Zelda, what in the absolute heck? The grandma with the Civil War ghost was my great grandmother. Was my grandma's mom. So my grandma Sass is the one that I told, the psychic. So we sat there, we talked about it. And of course, now listen, again, did not have, I mean, I'm in the middle of Ohio. I did card readings with my grandmother with a Gypsy Witch playing card deck. Never even heard of the tarot deck before. Shelter much, but had this thirst for paranormal. Back then, ghost hunting, ghosts, all of that stuff. I think he was from, I can't even remember, Beckley? I don't know. Huntington. Is that West Virginia? So it was just surreal. Because back then you didn't know where to turn. So we went to our local library. There was nothing. what do? You go to the local library in a little burg like I grew up in and say, look, can you give us your ghost hunting section? They would have looked at me and called my pastor. No kidding. So we had no resources. The only resources I had was my grandparents and the great grandparents that could tell us anything. And we did everything we could to try to research this. I don't even think that the guys told their parents. I just don't even, nobody really told anybody, because what do? You tell, and then all of a sudden you get committed because they think that you've gone off your Fruit Loops. Hello. So that right there, that gives this story right here gives me the chills, and it would make an excellent movie. I should write a book. I'm going to tell you, I would whip Stephen King's butt in writing books, because most of my scary stuff is true. So the thing now that I think about, because there were fields coming up to this house and they were cornfields, someone had to plant them. And if I would have been using my noodle instead of worrying about peach pie at Stan's, I would have gone back the next day and gone to these farm and said, who, what, where, when. But I didn't, because I was scared to go back, and of course had Dad's car. So that is story number 1. Are you ready for another one? This other. This is a good one. True story. And you can see the setting, and I always make the settings so I can just give you an idea. I don't know if you can see. Let me take this banner down. I think you all know. Let me hide it so you can see. See there? Right here. That little candle. And now this is a mausoleum. This is a cemetery out in the middle of God's country. And I'm calling it that because, quite frankly, only God can find it. I'm not even sure that I could find it again. This was in Virginia. I'm driving around. I was working for the Psychic Friends Network. Just took my husband to the ship, getting ready for a 6-month cruise. And on the way back, after saying goodbye, I passed by this, and we all know that Virginia is just rich in history and rich in paranormal history, including the house that I lived in. I'll be telling that story soon. Now, I'm driving down the road and I'm thinking, you know what? Instead of going this way, I've never been in a particular area before. I'm just going to go ahead and go around another way. Well, that really wasn't the right thing to do. And remember how I tell you everything not to do. I was the poster child in the paranormal community for that one, because at this time I was also studying in the Edgar Cayce Society. And they did not want any of us doing any of this paranormal stuff. you could not tell me differently. I had some buddies there, another lady married, another couple of guys married, but this time they weren't with me. So I'm driving. Me, myself, and I, driving down the road. And I'm just kind of looking around because it was just so picturesque and beautiful. And the sun wasn't quite setting yet. It was about 4 o'clock, but you could tell that the sun was on its descent. Now, this was May. And so I see off in the distance, faded, like way in the distance, faded cemetery. And I thought, oh boy, I don't have to be home for anything. Why don't I just go and poke around? Now, I always carry a notebook with me. I always carry a pen. I always carry a notebook. And being the Italian, Irish, German mama that I am, I always, and I don't have the one that I want anymore, but I always carry or always wear that safety pin. And it's one of those things. If you are Italian, German, or Irish, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The safety pin that you don't display on your clothes, you wear it on the inside of your clothes. And you've got some protection with that and all that. I made sure I had an iron one because iron is something that I've always known is a protective element. So, pardon me. I don't know what it is when I talk. My voice sounds wonderful, but then I get on here and it's like, hello. Thank you. So, I pull up, I turn around, I find this wee little opening to the narrow, wee little opening to the cemetery. And I'm going down this. Now, if the Zelda now could look back at the Zelda then, I would go, girl, anybody, anything could be back there. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon by yourself. But no. So I find this cemetery. Now I'm walking around because you can see, the graves were just sprinkled all over. And let me see if I can show you. You see, there's a little bit of a pathway through here. I think that's the best way I can describe it. A little pathway through. The trees looked barren. It looked like it had been lost in time. It was obviously some Civil War people there, and in the way back was Revolutionary War. This was an old cemetery. It didn't look like it had been around, and it was forgotten. Let me say that. If you didn't have any business to be there, it was forgotten. So I get out of my car and I take the keys with me because you always know you take the keys, you don't leave them in your car. I always lock the car doors except for the driver's door because you just don't know. And if you have to get in there, you can go, I've just got this weirdness. So I get out of the car and I'm looking around, and I'm going to tell you something. Pardon me. I'm going to tell you something. These stones were fascinating. I have never seen epitaphs on these stones like I've seen before. So, drawing, making notes, la da 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 da. And before you know it, because when there's a treed area, it always looks darker than what it is. So before you know it, it's starting to get dark. I didn't have a flashlight. There were no cell phones back then. I mean, after all, I think they just invented the wheel, right? Hello? So no flashlights, I had nothing. And I looked up because I just kept walking, not paying attention, not looking up, not paying attention to my surroundings. And all the gravestones start looking alike. And it all starts kind of sort of looking a little misty. Even at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I start getting a little panicky because I'm thinking, oh, heck. Because this place was big, but it was sprinkled through a wooded area. So no matter where I went, there were gravestones and these trees, and I could not find my car. Pardon me. So like little Gretel, I start marking the best I could with either stones or flowers or something that I could find my way and know if I was doubling back or if I had made a mistake and going the wrong way. And all of a sudden, I see this light. And I didn't know it was lit before. So I followed the light. And the one thing about it, when it gets dark, you could have a light that is like, look, almost as big as this, even a candle. And if you are in the dark, your eyes are going to focus and you're going to be able to see that. It's going to illuminate. So all of a sudden, I walk up and I see this, a candle on this grave. And I'm not scared. So I wanted to walk up here and see what this is all about. I get close and I see that the stone is cracked and there's some like vines growing on it. And there's nothing on the tombstone, not one word, nothing. And it is about this far from this mausoleum with a candle in it also. So someone had to be there. So I thought. So I get up to this area and I noticed there was nothing here. And I hear walking behind me. And I got a little story about that too, I'm going to tell you. So I hear walking behind me. And I'm thinking, oh, so this person, maybe they can help me. Duh. Maybe they can help me. I turned around and nothing is there. So the first thing I'm thinking of is, oh, heck, it's a wild animal. Because they do have them in Virginia. And so I thought, I better be careful. So I'm seeing these kind of like limbs that are on the ground. So I get one, put my foot on it, break it. The end is sharp. So I'm just kind of walking around with my little staff and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, right. I'm going to fight somebody off with this broken limb. That's the way to go, Zelda. So I started walking up this way toward this tree. And I turned around and looked this way. And there was a black mass standing there. Just standing there, all in black. Now, there are different type of hauntings. There are poltergeists, there's orbs, there's elementals, and then there's a black mass. We don't know where black masses come from. Nobody's really been able to study. How do you study that? You don't know. They just show up. And this was the second time that I saw one of these. The first time was in a building with my buddies that I had previously mentioned. We were in a building and there's a black mass that shows up. So I'm just standing there. And it's rolling through my mind. And I'm touching my safety pin because I made sure that that's iron. And I'm trying to keep my breathing even because in these situations, this type of frequency it can tell when things are off, and you just don't want to get into that position where the anxiety takes over, because believe me, my darlings, if you start breathing under anxiety, like the more you do that, the more it's going to cause the anxiety. So you've got to just, and I felt myself kind of going, oh heck, where's my car? How, I can't, because if you can see here, how do you run? I mean, you can't run, and this is before the zombie in Tennessee, so, but you can't run in this type of thing because you see the small stones here. All you need to do is catch your foot, ankle, leg, knee on some, and you're wiping out right there. And what if you get hurt? What if you get knocked out? So I'm thinking, forget about what's on here. And I dropped my journal. And the moment that I dropped my journal, that black mass moved. And I thought, okay. So I'm trying to get back, and I'm getting closer to this mausoleum, trying to walk back. And there comes that black mass again. Now that black mass stood right here, right in between this grave and right in between this mausoleum. And I thought, you know something? If I can make it to that mausoleum, I'm safe. I don't know if you know this or not, my darlings, but the old-fashioned mausoleums have iron gates on them. And this was old enough. I knew it had to be at least Civil War. This was old enough that I knew it had an iron gate. And I thought, there's a candle on the inside that has to be open. I'm going to take my chance. So, yeah, nobody said, ma'am, run. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. It should have. My brain should have been, Zelda, you bad girl, you know the rules. You just go out and do your own thing. So I come up to this. Easy, not quickly, easy. I made it right here on the steps. This black mass moves, and is standing right behind this grave. So I knew it was connected in some way. Just as I was standing here on this step, I hear a whisper. Here. And I thought, now is not the time to have to wipe out the back of my pants. I was scared. I'm just going to tell you, I was scared. So I thought, that's got to be coming from the mausoleum. I get up there and I put my hand on the gate. And just as I did, I felt this entire energy. I opened up the gate. I walked in that mausoleum, and the flame on that candle started going really, really high. I thought, oh, well, there's some energy here. So I walked in there and walked to the back. There was a ledge at the back of this museum and mausoleum. There was a ledge. So I went back to the back of that, and I knew that whatever it was that was out here could not cross that iron gate. So I went into that mausoleum and I sat on that bench, and it just kept getting darker and darker and darker. And I kept looking out here, and that black mass was not going away. It was like he was waiting. And that candle right there at the bottom of that cemetery was still lit. Now, there was a part of me that thought, well, if I start yelling for help, and then I thought, to whom? That doesn't make any sense. Calm down. I sat in there, and then you start hearing the night noises, the little crackling of maybe animals walking through, the little chirping of crickets, the little tree noises, the breaking of limbs, and your imagination can just go crazy. What I did not want to do is show any type of upset or fear, because that fuels this stuff. Because remember, anything like this, including our EVPs that we do, feeds off of energy, pure energy. Now, if you're laughing, my son is in a tournament, and I'm going to tell you, I have not heard laughing like that, like I've had today in such a long time. I was laughing because I heard them laughing, and I could hear them, and I had his stream going on my computer as I was working and doing some other things. And so I'm glad to hear laughter today. So just so you know, I don't have ghosts in the background laughing. So anyway, so I'm sitting in the back of this mausoleum. And I thought, somebody's in here. You know, it started coming to my senses. Somebody's in here. What's happening? So I'm looking around, and this mausoleum was built for a woman, one woman, and her body was in there. I couldn't make out her name. All I know, it was something like Annie, Anna, Anne. And the first thing I said was, wow, that's my great-grandmother's name. And it was like I felt this calm. Hi, Stephanie. I know exactly where you are, my darling. I felt this calm come over me. And I thought, somebody's protecting her from this black mass. Somebody is protecting her. That's why there's the iron gate. That's why there's the building. That's where the mausoleum. So I sat down at the back of this, and I just basically said, okay, I'll make you a deal. This is pretty uncomfortable. Obviously, you've been here for a little while, and I promise that I'm not going to hurt anything, take anything. I'll take care of you if you take care of me. All the while, I'm seeing the flame in this candle jumpity jump, the flame in this candle jumpity jump. So I'm sitting in there. Now listen, this is inevitable. At some time, you're going to have to use the restroom. At some time, you're getting thirsty, you're getting hungry, you're getting tired. And it's certainly not, I mean, you're in a mausoleum in the out and open with here, and there's not really anywhere to drop trowel and say, okay, here I am, I'm just going to do it. So you kind of just wait. You just kind of wait. So I'm thinking there's more to this story than meets the eye. So I tucked back in this corner right here, sat there and just kind of sucked myself out. Because I know the gate was to keep this black mass who was prancing around. It was to keep it out. And I'm thinking, here I am caught in the middle of this. Isn't this great? Pardon me. So something comes over me. And I start singing these old hymns really low, like old hymns. And it was like the place was quiet. It was like just quiet. And then I would stop and I would listen. Well, finally it got to the point where I was so tired. I thought, nothing's going to get me. I'm safe. I'm going to stay here. I got to. I did not want to take a chance with it being pitch black dark at this point. No flashlight. No, nothing. Just because so the next thing you know, I'm waking up. I fell asleep. And I'm waking up, and it was the wee hours of the morning. It had to be, because I didn't have a watch with me or anything else. I knew, because you could tell when the morning is start to coming up. You know, the light starts to beam. You can tell it, and my eyes were really acclimating. All of a sudden, I hear this walking. And I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody's coming. What's going on? And I see someone coming over. Now, it had to be like 5:30 in the morning, or you could see a little bit of movement. There was a person comes over and takes and blows that candle out. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh heck, they're going to come in here. So I thought, well, I don't want to scare that person. Can you imagine hearing hello come from a mausoleum? Hello? No. So I finally said, I was knocking on the side of the mausoleum, and I saw him turn around, and I said, hello, I'm kind of stuck in here. And he came over and he said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Have you been here all night? And I said, yes, of my own demise. And he said, well, I need to put this candle out. Do you want to come on out? And I said, I do, but sir, I need to find my car. And he said, well, I saw a car. Do you have a brown Volvo? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, it's back over. And he pointed to me and, whatever, and gave me a good way to get there. And I said, thank you so. And he said, I just have to ask, how did you end up here? And I said, well, I have to ask, why are these candles here? What's going on? So I told him my story, dropped my husband, who was a lieutenant commander at the time, and I said I was driving home. He was going to the ship, said goodbye. I came a different way, and I stopped in, I landed. That was it. And he said, wow, lady. And I said, yeah. Well, I explained where I worked. And of course, he had an idea, like a lot of people do, your favorite grifting psychic. So, he was not so helpful. And I said, well, you know what? That's okay. I said, I'm just here and I wasn't doing anything. And he said, well, I don't have to call the police to. I said, for what? I was stuck here all night because there's this black mass. The moment that I said black mass, the color drained out of his face. He was like a sheet standing there. Now, he was not old, but he was, middle age. And he looked at me and he goes, oh my God. I said, yeah, that's why I was in the mausoleum. Because those gates are iron and nothing's going to come to me. And I said, before I go, can you tell me what this is? And he looked at me and he goes, well, if you want to wait on me, here goes, I don't know what it is. I look like I'm some dame that will stop and get a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. What do you think about that? Sorry, you just saw my earpiece. And so he said, well, if you can wait for me a minute, he said, I'll walk you to your car. I'll come get you and let's go have a cup of coffee. I said, that would be great because I need to use the ladies' room. He said, that's fine. We'll go on down there and we, whatever. I knew as soon as we as soon as we drove out of there, I knew exactly where I was. It was just that I got so turned around from not paying attention. Lesson number 1. So we pull up into this public place. Now, my darlings, I'm just going to tell you something. I wouldn't do that now. And you wouldn't catch me out into a cemetery. And this is why my son always warns me and says, Mom, you're not going to a cemetery. Not by yourself. You're not going. Well, they're not going to hurt me. No, but you don't know what is there that might. And he's very right. Because this time it scared me, and I'm fearless when it comes to this stuff. But this scared me because I was trapped. I don't use crystals. I don't use any of that for me. I don't do the crystal thing because with a black mass, a crystal is not going to protect you. All of that sort of thing is just not going to. You can maybe throw it at them, and it still is not going to work. I use prayer and iron, and that does it. Prayer and iron. So we sit down in this nice little cafe type thing. I don't mean to be a smarty pants, but for me, it just is, I walk in and he walks in behind me and I said, cup of coffee, endless cup, eggs, toast. I'm buying. And I went to the ladies' room and came back. I sat down and they brought our food. I was famished. And I'm going to tell you something. I sat there and I said, You can talk to me. I'm eating. I don't want to be rude. I've been in there since 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And so I just need to collect myself. I want some coffee, eggs, and toast, and then I'm going to go home and go to bed. And he said, okay. So here is the story. Are you ready, my darlings? Back in the day, there was a young lady who was very wealthy. Miss Annie, I think. He wouldn't tell me her name because I would be the first one running down to the genealogy society and trying to look her up because, back then we didn't have any internet, no anything like that. So I lived at the genealogical society. So he said she was the daughter of one of these land wealthy individuals during the Civil War. Now, I love Virginia, and I love the accent in Virginia because it's just subtle and easy. So, there evidently, she fell in love with a soldier that came through. Going through the area, whatever. He was from the South. It turns out that he had another woman that he was betrothed to, engaged with. But this young man didn't tell this young lady all of this. She fell in love and wanted to get married, and he wanted to marry her. But then it came out that he had somebody else dangling on a string somewhere else in Virginia, like upwards to Richmond. So evidently things got a little tough. The other, and believe me, nothing has changed. It doesn't matter how, when, where, what it is. It just does not matter anything. Because when somebody's feeling like they're cheated on or whatever, they take revenge. Now, this other lady up near Richmond, her family was very political. They had connections and they had money. It was this is old money, land rich, really. But the other lady was proper. And she just had an absolute hissy fit. So what does she do? She evidently hired a witch. No kidding. A witch. To go down to this area. This was just south of Williamsburg. Well, not just south, but south of Williamsburg. So she hires a witch to go down there and do her bidding for her. That's right. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Enter the witch. Now, this witch, story has it, came up from New Orleans. And the woman from Richmond, her father summoned whomever to go get this woman and to bring her there to take care of Miss Annie. So amazingly enough, it came time for all of this to go down and for all of this to happen. And evidently, she was just this beautiful blonde, the epitome of the South, beautiful blonde, gone with the wind, Melanie type, gorgeous. And evidently, the political woman was completely the opposite. And her father made arrangements for her to be married to this young man. So this witch goes down to this area, befriends Annie and her family, and be careful, that's what they do. And I'll give you a little hint. Sometimes these people that work in dark arts will befriend others until they feel that the time is right. And then they will come out. We may know one. So, she comes down to this area. And evidently, this young lady starts getting ill. And it was bad. It was horribly illness that was horrible. That she lost a lot of weight. Her hair was falling out. She was going into skin and bones. Now, I want you to know this. Any type of practitioner like that is an evil. I know many people who, say they are witches. I don't like that name, just like I don't like psychics. And quite frankly, I'll just tell you this. I've met some witches, practitioners, that are more kind than the Christians that I've met. Anyway, we're not going to even go there. So this was a witchery, right? This was a Christian family, and this witch stepped in. This poor young lady was bedridden within about 10 days. Hair falling out, teeth falling out. And at this point, they knew that there was something wrong because the doctor had visited her many, many times and said, there's nothing wrong with her. Why this is happening? So, this young man hears by the grapevine, because he was an officer. He happened to be down right around Annie, and he told Annie, he said, look, I'm not going anywhere. You die, I die. And he said, I will be with you forever. You don't need to worry about it. I'm not going back to them. Well, guess what? You don't want to make a witch mad. And that made her mad. And it made we're going to call her Penelope. Penelope the political. Miss Political Penelope, it made her mad. And she basically said, unleash everything that you have, not on her, on the family. I want them ruined. I want this young man ruined. She was like giving the witch the orders. Well, the witch listened. And before you know it, Miss Annie had passed away in her sleep. This young man was so distraught that he got out on his horse. I need to write a book. These are so great. He got out on his horse, took off on the horse. The horse stumbled. He dropped off the horse, broke his neck, and was gone. The next thing you know, oh, it didn't stop there. The mother was making, this is the story goes, the mother was making, what do they call that? Apple butter. She was making apple butter. And as you know, I mean, what do you do when you do that? You chomp on this, you eat this, you take a little bit of this. Oh my. Oh my. She choked on an apple and she died. The next thing you know, she had 2 other brothers. They had accidents and they were gone, and the old man was left. He built the mausoleum for his daughter. He knew at this point, he knew what had happened because the young man, before he went off and fell off his horse, told him they hired this witch. And this is what's happening to the family and to me and to everyone around. And so he knew that there was a good witch. I don't know how they all knew this, but hello. He went to her and said, I feel like I have to protect my daughter beyond the grave. What can we do? And he said, or she said rather, to the father, you build a mausoleum, you put an iron gate, you keep a candle burning in the mausoleum, and where the young man was buried, which was right here, facing the mausoleum, you keep a candle at the base of his stone. You do not write his name. You do not write anything on his stone. And that's what he did. He took it upon himself to bury this young man, contacted the family. Hi, MJ, look at this. I'm loving it. And so he said, and I said, well, okay, that doesn't make sense. But what about the black mass? And he said the black mass showed up after Papa passed away. Yes, my darling, this is shade 117. Thank you. It was Mary Jennings in the chat that suggested this. But if you're going to wear red lipstick, you got to use purple toothpaste first. Okay. Back to the story. So, okay, hold on. It is the golden rose. This stuff is so yummy. Look at this applicator. Is that, hello? Shade 117. We will have a makeup tutorial. Okay. So after all of this deep down muckmire mayhem happened with this poor family in Virginia, this witch, because after all was said and done, political Penelope, evidently, she was so stuck up, was not happy, and was mad at the witch. There was a huge big thing over that. And the ultimate ending of that is that there was a black mass that was conjured. And evidently, the moment that the candles go out, story tells that the black mass will step in and will take Annie and this young man. Now, is that possibility? No, it's not. But when you're the parents and the father, and all this is going down, and you don't have somebody that basically stands there and says, ma'am, run, you're going to listen. So for 200 and some years, the family of this family have been going here and putting the candles. And I asked this man I was having coffee, eggs, and toast with, no peach pie, unfortunately, what happens? What happens if you miss? What happens if that goes out? What if it rains? What happens? He said, if it rains, they have a certain big glass jar, like a big pickle jar, something like that they've made so that air can get into it, and they cover the candle with the glass jar so the rain doesn't put it out. Sounds plausible to me. There was not rain going to get to this here. And so evidently, that's what it's all about. And he looked at me and goes, and you saw the black mass? I said, oh, yes, sir. And I said, and my notebook is still back there. He said, should I go and get it for you? And I said, yes, sir. I said, and if you want to, I will meet you back here later on this afternoon. I'm going to go home, freshen up, get some rest, say a prayer, figure out what this all means, and then I will pick up my notebook. Okay. So I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, this is either the craziest story or the best story I've ever heard. I get home. I call my grandmother. She was still alive then. I get my mom because we didn't have cell phones. So I had to, calling from Virginia to Tennessee, I had to call my mother and grandmother on a conference call. You know how you used to do the conference calls? Hold on a minute, click, click, and you could patch somebody in. Oh, those were the days. The young ones don't even know the struggle, right? Hello. So I get home. I'm calling mom and grandma. And mom, listen, my mom and grandma were the absolute best, other than being Hollywood wannabes. The Grace Kelly and Claudette Colbert. That's another story for another time. They were like, oh. These two gals sat with me, and I said, you all have to see the original Terminator. These two gals sat with me and watched the original Terminator. They had popcorn. They had candy. They made snacks. They had pop. They had this. And they were just sitting there, as my grandmother would say, mowing it in. Don't know what mow. I don't even know how to spell mow. But that's what we were all doing. Well, that's what these ladies were. They were just, of course, my family's got stories of our own. And I got to tell you a historical story. And I do want you to stay tuned over the next couple of days, because I'm going to record that and put that together for you. And oh my, you all are going to like that. And it is a spooky story that stems from my family and Görlitz, that's handed down through the centuries and came across from Europe into the United States. And it is a good one. So we've got stories. So they were sitting there. And of course, you know what they said? I got to tell you this. You know what they said? My grandmother says, listen, I don't know. She had kind of a little, I don't know about you, Zell, but I wouldn't mind saying this. And she says, Carol, that was my mother's name. What do you say we go on a little trip? And I said, listen, if you girls can be ready by tomorrow, I will make that trip. I will come to Tennessee and pick you up, and I will take you there. So at 4:30 in the afternoon, I meet Mr. Guardian of the Candles. We'll call him that. I meet Mr. Guardian of the Candles. He has my notebook, and he's got the funniest look on his face. And he hands it to me. He goes, here, miss. I said, yeah. And I look in it. My notes were in it. Everything was fine. I said, I dropped it out in the middle. He goes, you didn't drop it out in the middle of anything. I said, where was it? He said, it was in the mausoleum. No way was it in that mausoleum, because I dropped that when I saw that big black mass, and I thought, do I cut and run, or do I stand here and pretend that I'm a tree? I just dropped the notebook. And I told him where I dropped the notebook, and it would have been back here. You see this one with the cross? I remember that one with the cross that was by this tree. It was back over in there and there. He said, oh no, ma'am, it was in the mausoleum. I said, oh, that was Annie. He goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, I made a deal with her. And he looked at me like, and I said, listen, my darling, you can't say anything about me. Who's showing up nightly to light the candles? I think you and I are in the same position, pal. And he's laughing at this point because he knows how silly this sounds. And I said, I made a deal with her. She takes care of me, and I take care of her. And he said, well, isn't that something? I said, yes, it is. So I am asking more about this black mass. And he said, the only thing that we know is that is the spirit of the witch trying to get into Annie. And this is why. Because anybody who ever is a practitioner of these dark things, and somebody up in Massachusetts, if you're listening right now, you know, if you know, you know. Don't bother doing that. But when you practice dark things and you cause such harm to someone that this was caused. Now, did I get to verify this? No, I didn't. I just didn't. And I wish I would have, but I just didn't. If you know, you know. We can call her Penelope, Penelope, political Penelope. Why do I want to do that? I guess it's to prove that she was a snob. No, not the good ones here. Not the good ones in Massachusetts. Those ones who want to desiccate the truth. All right, so anyway. And so he said, evidently it's this. So here's the rest of the story, my darlings. Well, part 2 of the story. So evidently, because you can't cast like that without coming back on you. And that person who hired that witch and the family was equally responsible, an accessory to the crime, probably if not equal to, but more so, for wanting to hurt. Because in the reality of it is, in 50 years, it didn't matter anyway. And that's the way you have to think. Doing that sort of thing now, and 50 years, it doesn't matter. Hello. So evidently, this witch, don't know what happened, but on her way back from Richmond, after she received her payment for services rendered, had a horrible accident and burned by fire. Good. Bye. She self-cremated. They said it was just the biggest fluke. Well, in this type of realm, there are no flukes. She died horrifically in a fire, going back to New Orleans. Story says. Now, political Penelope from Richmond, Virginia, was unalived because she was robbed. Somebody unalived her. Someone pew-pewed her father at some type of political convention. So everything came right back onto them. Boom. And evidently that black mass, now you can't prove it. Nobody knows, but that's legend. But hey, I'm here. It's this time of year. I'm believing it. I saw it. Evidently, this black mass is this, not the spirit, but the energy of this witchy type. Ooh, witchy woman. Sorry. This witchy type, because evidently when the candles go out, she's going to go in and desecrate poor Annie. I mean, after what more? The poor woman is gone. What more can you do? But evidently that ain't good enough. She got to wait. So to this day, is this burning? I don't know. Do you remember me telling you that I work with a gentleman who has a corporation in Virginia? And he is close to Richmond. And there's a lot of things going on at that particular time. And I asked him today, when I spoke to him, I said, listen, if I gave you the coordinates, would you go visit this cemetery? And he said, you know what, Zelda? I'm sorry, but I don't think so. And I said, well, let me ask it to you this way. If I come over there, would you go with me? And he said, you know what, Zelda? I don't think so, because I don't want to be hanging around and get stuck in a mausoleum. Fair enough. So I don't know if it's still there. Maybe someday I'll find out. I don't want to send anybody over there. So now comes the next day. So I look in my journal. It's all intact. Everything is fine. I get home. I call Grandma and Mom and I said, look here. I'm going to be on the road in the morning. I'll have Skippy, which happened to be my little 3-legged dog. And he wasn't I named him Skippy before he lost his leg. Let's hope it wasn't prophetic. Anyway, that's another story. So, my darlings, I hopped in my car the next day. Got Skippy. Said, come on, brother, we're going. Filled up, got my check. And the reason I did say that, because quite frankly, I'm just going to say this. When I was working for the Psychic Friends Network, I made almost as much as my lieutenant commander husband on that psychic line. So, but see, here's the gig. Back then I had to wait for the mail to run for my check to come. Don't you love those days? Do you miss those days? Now it's like, oh, well, wake up. Oh, went into my Venmo. There's PayPal. There's Cash App. There's Zelle. Boy, we are puppies, aren't we? We are just literally puppies. But those were the days. So I waited for my check. And boy, I was sitting by the porch. Seriously, I was packed. Skippy was ready to go. I had everything buttoned down, everything ready. And Lord God Almighty, I was ready to hit the road. The mailman comes up and he looks at me, and he always gave me a hard time because I was always lurking, because I had the mailbox right there by the front door. I was always lurking, and I would go right out when I saw him come up, and he'd hand me like this, and then he'd jerk it back like this, yanking my chain. I'd say, oh, you don't even know who I am. And he would laugh like crazy. He was wonderful, wonderful mail person. I got my check, got my dog, got an overnight bag because I knew I was going to have to spend the night. Took my goodies with me, a deck of cards, made sure I had my lipstick and a few other things, because back then I looked a little better and all I needed was lipstick. Had my hair up, boof, done. It was the 80s. Hello. Hair was, and had earrings, done. Hit the road, mama. So I get on the road to Tennessee, and I'm thinking, wow. And then I start thinking, do I really want to take my grandmother and my mother here? Do I really want to, I know they want to go. These two are like frickin' frack, buddy. They would, if I say, let's go, they would say, how far? So we get to Tennessee, and I said, look, you guys are going to come back, but I am just not so sure that I want to take you to this place. It may be dangerous. And look, hello, you all can't run. And oh no, they were not going to hear of it. They had planned. In fact, my grandmother packed a little picnic, because that was a thing that you used to do back in my day growing up. You go to the cemetery, you sit down, and you have a picnic. I'm like, okay. Oh, okay, Grandma. But see, my grandmother was really in tune and she was really psychic. Now, my mom was like this. My mom was kind of like this new soul that had just been placed in a meat suit that was kind of like, oh, the life is wonderful. Let's trust everybody. And my grandmother was like that, let's carry something in her pocketbook, which I did not let her do. Coming across the state line, you don't do that sort of thing, but oh, she was a pistol. Yeah, no pun intended. So we're on our way, and I'm telling you, nobody could get a word in edgewise. Grandma, mom, me, talk, stories and all this other stuff. Now, they had never seen my house. This was the house that I bought from the great-granddaughter of President Monroe. And her husband, she was in her 90s when I bought it. And her husband was the man who built this house over 100 years. Or no, it was quite almost 100 years old. And it was gorgeous. And I really lean into that historical stuff. We were in Virginia. I lived near Fort Monroe. It was gorgeous. I painted my living room this beautiful, buttery kind of a, I had white, what's it called? White woodwork. And the walls were this color in the living room. The kitchen was a deep red with white, and the dining room was billiard green with white trim. And I'm telling you, that place was a show place. Hardwood floors. I hated leaving it, but I did. My grandmother and mom walked in, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. They loved it. And while we were there, I took them up to Williamsburg, took them to all these different places, very historical, blah, blah. I had a painting of Washington in my dining room that had this, he had all the colors in my house in this painting. So he had this beautiful turquoise coat or this sash on with the beigey vest, and I mean, it was just gorgeous. So we get ready, and I said, we're going to go out there early enough. So it was the next day. We go out there. Lo and behold, it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Grandma's got her little picnic. She had kept it cold, put it in the refrigerator. She was bound to determine we were going to have that picnic. And I said, you know what? If we go have a picnic, we're going to go have it right on the stairs of that mausoleum, because if anything happens, we can just jump over. Hello. We go. We had this lovely picnic. The candles weren't lit yet because it wasn't evening. And so it was peaceful, gorgeous, lovely. And I told him, I said, look, I'm not going to hold you guys on a leash, but we're all going to know we're not going to get lost in here. And I was marking the trail. They had the best time because, like I said, I have never seen epitaphs on headstones that were this eloquent in some ways, because they were just so eloquent. And it was just amazing. We went through, I think we spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours there. We left, and that was it. Never went back. Had a great time, took them through Fort Monroe, took them through all these different places, went out to eat, went out to do all these things, and it was a grand time. But I've always wondered, And this is this time of year. Now, that was in May. Of course, not any time near now. That would have been something, wouldn't it? But I lived in the same house that I had the call from. I swear it was Jacques St. James, the vampire, on Psychic Friends Network, and lived there. And then I decided to leave my marriage, and I left and went to Tennessee. Then I went to Ohio, and then I went to Florida. And I just started traveling around because Psychic Friends Network unfortunately went bankrupt. And I woke up one morning without a job. And I was very upset and thought, you know what? What am I going to do? You know what? I'll do it on my own. So I started traveling the circuit, started going, because back then you had psychic fairs. You wanted to go meet a psychic, you went to the psychic fairs, and you went to this, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Pardon me, just a second. But I will never forget this one, because this was another amazing story. I don't know what it is. The cemetery stories are always my favorite. I don't know why. But there's going to be time when I'm back at it again, and I'm going to take you guys with me, and we're going to do everything together.